lying down at one, the comfort of quiet communion with her was gone for good. And there were also disturbing sounds by this time, voices, footsteps forward, the steward flitting along the main deck, a busily ministering spirit. A handbell tinkled urgently under the poop deck. I found my two officers waiting for me near the supper table in the lighted cuddy. We sat down at once, and as I helped the chief mate, I said, "Are you aware that there is a ship anchored inside the islands? I saw her mastheads above the ridge as the sun went down." He raised sharply his simple face, overcharged by a terrible growth of whisker, and emitted his usual ejaculations. "Bless my soul, sir! You don't say so!" My second mate was a round-cheeked, silent young man, grave beyond his years, I thought. But as our eyes happened to meet, I detected a slight quiver on his lips. I looked down at once. It was not my part to encourage sneering on board my ship. It must be said, too, that I knew very little of my officers. In consequence of certain events of no particular significance except to myself, I had been appointed to the command only a fortnight before. Neither did I know much of the hands forward. All these people had been together for 18 months or so, and my position was that of the only stranger on board. I mention this because it has some bearing on what is to follow. But what I felt most was my being a stranger to the ship, and if all the truth must be told, I was somewhat of a stranger to myself. The youngest man on board, barring the second mate, and untried as yet by a position of the fullest responsibility, I was willing to take the adequacy of the others for granted. They had simply to be equal to their tasks. But I wondered how far I should turn out faithful to that ideal conception of one's own personality every man sets up for himself secretly. Meantime, the chief mate, with an almost visible effect of collaboration on the part of his round eyes and frightful whiskers, was trying to evolve a theory of the anchored ship. His dominant trait was to take all things into earnest consideration. He was of a painstaking turn of mind. As he used to say, he liked to account to himself for practically everything that came in his way, down to a miserable scorpion he had found in his cabin a week before. The why and wherefore of that scorpion, how it got on board and came to select his room rather than the pantry, which was a dark place and more what a scorpion would be partial to, and how on earth it managed to drown itself in the inkwell of his writing desk, had exercised him infinitely. The ship within the islands was much more easily accounted for, and just as we were about to rise from table, he made his pronouncement. She was, he doubted not, a ship from home lately arrived. Probably she drew too much water to cross the bar, except at the top of spring tides. Therefore she went into that natural harbour to wait for a few days in preference to remaining in an open roadstead. "That's so," confirmed the second mate, suddenly, in his slightly hoarse voice. "She draws over 20 feet. She's the Liverpool ship Sephora with a cargo of coal, 123 days from Cardiff." We looked at him in surprise. "The tugboat skipper told me when he came on board for your letters, sir," explained the young man. "He expects to take her up the river the day after tomorrow." After thus overwhelming us with the extent of his information, he slipped out of the cabin. The mate observed regretfully that he could not account for that young fellow's whims. What prevented him telling us all about it at once, he wanted to know. I detained him as he was making a move. For the last 2 days the crew had had plenty of hard work, and the night before they had had very little sleep. I felt painfully that I, a stranger, was doing something unusual when I directed to let all hands turn in without setting an anchor watch. I proposed to keep on deck myself till 1 o'clock or thereabouts. I would get the second mate to relieve me at that hour. "He will turn out the cook and the steward at 4, I concluded, and then give you a call. Of course, at the slightest sign of any sort of wind, we'll have the hands up and make a start at once." He concealed his astonishment. "Very well, sir." Outside the cuddy, he put his head in the second mate's door to inform him of my unheard-of caprice to take a 5 hours anchor watch on myself. I heard the other raise his voice incredulously. "What? The captain himself?" Then a few more murmurs, a door closed, then another. A few moments later I went on deck.